right, Toby, welcome to the show. We got through our bits of technical difficulties to get here. I'm delighted to finally have you here.
I'm excited to be with you this afternoon.
Awesome, awesome. I like to ask my guests to introduce themselves because I kind of have a knack for botching, introductions. So, I'd love to hear from you just a bit about who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Absolutely. So once again, my name's Toby Ramirez-Johnson. I work for Omni Hotels in the capacity of a corporate director of human resources. I've been in hospitality and hotels. I'm going to date myself right now, so we'll say a very long time. Started out from high school and really just found a passion for it and continue to grow into that world. And I'm excited. I recently moved to Dallas, Texas to be closer to the company, but about 70% of my time is traveling on the road, visiting some amazing locations. So working in HR, just helping in all capacities from hiring, retention, recruiting, culture building. So it's a little bit of everything, and I absolutely love it.
That's awesome. I mean, as the sort of like corporate director, and you're in the HQ of Omni is in Dallas, correct? If I'm hearing that correctly. And so how many hotels kind of fall under your purview? Like how many, do the GMs or is it the area directors roll up to you? How does the hierarchy kind of work?
So it's, we've actually renewed it since COVID. A lot of companies have tweaked and changed how we operate and are we more efficient. So currently we work by teams. So I have a team and my team oversees about 17 hotels, and really we're the support for the properties. So anything that they need help with that needs to elevate, I normally partner directly with the directors of human resources. And then we also have area directors of human resources that are kind of that boots on the ground and then elevate things over to us as well.
Okay, that's awesome. I mean, 17 hotels is a lot. So you must have, it sounds like a large number of humans to be responsible for, so to speak. I guess, jumping off from that, what are the kind of big challenges you see in HR in hotels today? What kind of big challenges kind of jump out at you?
It's really changed coming out of the pandemic. It was definitely finding humans to work again, right? So who had gotten used to being home. The other thing is our industry changed. Some people had a taste of different industries and jobs during the pandemic and decided maybe they didn't want to come back to hospitality anymore and work the craziness of hours and things of that nature. So recruiting was huge. And then we got them back. It was retention. So what did that effort look like? And I would say now we're seeing a lot more on the mental health side also, where people, there's just a lot of pressure in life that's going on at the moment. And people are bringing that, of course, they spend more time at work. So a lot of the training we find that we're doing is not just your typical training that we've done in the past, but how to equip even from a mental health capacity.
Yeah. Interesting. It's actually interesting that there's this sort of burgeoning focus on the mental health of the worker in hospitality. Why do you think that is? And obviously don't just say COVID.
No, I think, just life in general has changed. How do we receive information? I think our brains sometimes are an information overload. When you think of the number of emails you're looking at a day, text messages, when you're so many avenues to look at TV now these days, and, the news everything's bombarding people. And sometimes personally, I just feel, how can one person handle all of that? And then just the cares of life, the economy, the way things are priced as high as they are right now. There's a lot of worries that are out there. Our children have a lot more things that they're exposed to and they're dealing with, and they're bringing that home. So I think for the everyday worker, things you didn't have to worry about, you have a lot more generations that are now living more together, where, you didn't have parents living at home, and you can have up to 3 generations now living in a household. And how do you balance that? I would go stir crazy if I had my parents living at home with me and my children at the same time. So you just see a lot more of that.
Yeah, no, totally. But do you think as well that there's been a bigger focus from hospitality groups in general on sort of solving, working more with sort of understanding a willingness to see the hourly worker or the typical FTE in a more humane light, so to speak, since COVID. I feel like, from my own like podcast observation standpoint, I feel like my kind of hot take is that there obviously was pre 2020 a look and feel for like, mental health and benefits and making great place to work. And for those not watching, inverted commas, great place to work, try to like making that sort of like employee experience thing to now being, whoa, we need a real employee brand here to make people stay. Why do you think there's been such a pendulum shift as well? Like, what do you think has gone into it, especially in hospitality?
Well, my motto has always been keep the human and human resources. These are people that are working with us, but they have lives, they have full lives. So we should never just see them as an FTE or a body count, but really, who are they? So even from the initial interview process is making sure, right, that person is even a cultural fit for who your brand is and who your company is, which helps with that retention. But I think mental health has been an issue for a very long time, but there was a stigma with it and no one was really talking about it. So now that it's more verbal, people can actually identify with it and say, oh, that's what I'm dealing with, because they hear more people. If you're sick, most people say, if I'm sick, I'll go to a doctor. But before, if I was feeling off and I was having certain thoughts, I would be embarrassed to do that. So if you're armoring up, not just your HR professionals, but even some of the managers in your organization to look out for some of those signs, the loyalty you're even building with someone that you care about that. We just had one of our hotels, they were listening to some things from our associates, and they built, it was kind of, I think they call it a quiet room. It's specifically for mental health. And it's like, if you just need a few minutes during the day to decompress, you know what? Here's this quiet place for you. They have white noise in the background. Companies are being more aware of what these needs are these days. And if you're working for a great company that recognizes that, that's so important.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like one of these amazing things that like can be translated into benefits that can then be translated into material success for the organization. I mean, the quiet room, white noise machine. I mean, I don't sleep with white noise, but my partner does, so now I do. And I do find them very relaxing. But I think like, we've had this evolution or revolution, depending on who you ask, in terms of like putting the human back in human resources and hospitality. I think for a long time, sort of standard bearers in sort of HR and people culture have been very much like Silicon Valley tech companies with all these amazing benefits and keeping people with the goal of keeping people on the campus for as long as possible to do as much sort of creative work as possible. And we've seen that has like really led to like obviously extraordinary success of those businesses. And I feel like it's kind of taken a pandemic to kind of get hospitality.
Absolutely.
Wow, we need to look at these as not just disposable line items on a P&L. Effectively, I mean, that sounds really cruel, but like,
No,
it's like,
you're right. It's 100% right. And when you go back, I mean, when you look at certain families, there's just been generations upon generations that this is the industry that their family worked in. And that's just all you knew. I think of my children, all their lives, this is all I've worked in. And now they followed my footpaths. That's just kind of been how it went, where that pandemic did put everything on pause. I think a lot of people felt I've been loyal to hospitality for years and now I don't have a job and I don't know how I'm going to feed my family. And it's shifted some of that mindset. And you have a generation coming up where, in their mind, it's not acceptable to have to work a 50-hour work week when I can work from home or be entrepreneurial and have my own business and set my own hours. It really opened up a lot more avenue of opportunities for people that they didn't know before to explore.
Yeah, it's interesting, which kind of speaks to like the culture of like what separates good from great in hospitality is like this sort of evolution or revolution of sort of like culture within the whatever the resort, hotel, restaurant, pub, club, whichever. I think when it comes to like design, like good question for you actually. As sort of the corporate director of human resources, do you, when it comes to like say culture, people talk about like culture starts at the top, okay? But like, do you think that like say there's too much expected of designing a culture from the HR department that you guys are the standard prepare for it versus it coming from the top? Or like, I don't know. I feel like I've kind of heard that a bit from people. It's like, working in HR, that you are responsible for culture in a way that like the whole company and leadership should be responsible for culture.
No, well, if you're working for the right company, you'll understand that it does start from the top. And really, HR is just the culture champions to keep that message going. But we can be the champions all day long. But if you're not having that mirror image that your leaders are exhibiting that culture, so the associates see it every day, not just when they walk by the HR office to get some candy in the middle of the afternoon, your culture is not going to thrive. And specifically speaking regarding my company, we have such a strong culture before culture was a trend. I think right now, a lot of, it's trendy to have a good company culture, and a lot of people are trying to find out what that is. Well, we have been milestones ahead of that because that's really who we are. And no matter what property you go to, it amazes me, especially because I visit so many properties, different surveys we've taken, and you'll say, when you think of our brand, what do you hear? What do you think of? And it's always family. Like, that literally is always at the top. But it makes sense because when we go back, our company was founded by a family business. They sold it in 1996 to another family business. So when you talk about it starting from the top, they treat it as family, people that they embrace. So when you come in, if you have a strong culture, you're either going to blend into what's already been established, or you're going to be like that thumb, the odd one out. I think of when my family's from Puerto Rico, and I was born here, though, in New York, but I don't speak the language. I don't know a lot of the history. But when I go to Puerto Rico, I am so immersed into everything. It's amazing. I feel like I could rattle off things in Spanish. You smell the food, the people, the warmth. And that's what a strong culture is, that when someone comes in, that's exactly, they're like, wow, you feel it. It's not just in the HR department.
Well, that's exactly it. And I mean, that's such a thorough answer, first and foremost. And I guess, I mean, how do you go? You're very like kind of on the soapbox there, like, we got a great culture. This is why. How do you go about it, or how do you think, as a leader in human resources, how do you go about thinking about the impact that culture has and actually measuring that? Because, like, one of the things I hear is, it's hard to describe. Good culture is hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. So it's like, how do you think about it, or do you think about it in that context?
Well, we integrate everything into that culture. So, for instance, when we're doing our annual performance management feedback to the managers, our culture questions are incorporated in that document. We have a philosophy about the trilogy, the guest, the owner, associate, and how do we balance that out? So when we're making important decisions, and we're looking at things, we're like, how does this line up with our trilogy, our philosophy? So when you incorporate it, so it's more than just a poster on the wall, or you're just talking about it in new hire orientation, but you're bringing it to life with all the things that you're responsible for doing, it naturally becomes second nature. And that's why it makes it so easy for people to integrate, because from the beginning, they see, oh, this is just how we do things here, but it continues to build. And then also that associate feedback. We're a very feedback-driven organization with our annual surveys, our pulse surveys in between. We encourage one-on-ones with the managers. We do stay interviews at 45 days after someone's hired. How is it going? So you're constantly getting that feedback to say, do we need to pivot? Is something not working, before it becomes a bigger issue?
Totally. And I mean, that's amazing, first and foremost, to hear. And it's really cool to hear the process kind of so articulated. I think, like, when it comes to like, culture, like, it's kind of like two things. There's identifying the people you want to come into the company, and then there's keeping the ones that actually come in. So when it comes to like identifying, like, say the most important role in the hotel is the GM, for example, like, well, actually, I'll let you say, I presume you'd agree with me that the most important person, here's me assuming, making an ass out of you and me. But I would imagine you would agree that the GM is probably the most important person in the hotel in terms of like the running of the actual hotel itself. Yeah.
I would challenge you a little bit. And I would say probably most people in my organization would not say it's the general manager. And this may sound a little cliche, but it's really the line level staff. We have a servant leadership mindset, and the GM, he can't run a building by himself. It's going to take, and we have properties that have over 1,200 associates on a campus. So he may have that title, but most of our leaders are walking the walk, talking the talk. They're engaged with the associates. I'm so impressed that so many leaders that know associates, not just by their name, they know their family, their status, their children. So you can't be successful without the people. So when you look at the organization, that's where a lot of issues are. They have this general manager on the top, so to speak, where it's really the GM should be on the bottom, lifting up everybody else to the top.
Okay, fair. I guess, yeah. So like, obviously the frontline staff and people who are actually like on the ground, boots in the ground, like deliver the experience, especially in like a hotel where, one bad experience or one look at it and people are very quick to make judgments. Just look at TripAdvisor, I guess.
Oh yeah.
And so the question I want to get at is like more around identifying the talent, because obviously to be a GM means you're identified as somebody who is likely to have been somebody good in the ground in the first place. So when it comes to like the Omni way, so to speak, and I did that in the first comments. Whatever phrase you guys have for describing your way of working, what are like sort of the core kind of competencies you look for when it comes to like identifying what makes somebody high potential for GM or GM to administrative role? Like, what are the things you're kind of looking for?
Well, we have a basis of 12 competencies that have been around for a while, and just for any manager role, these are the areas we feel a solid leader in our organization will have. So from business acumen to managerial courage, things of that nature. We have different types of hotels. So we have what we call core hotels, we have convention hotels, and we have resorts. Yep. So some hotels are prime for first-time leaders that maybe you haven't been a general manager before, but you've worked your way up, whether it's our organization or another, and that's a prime location to kick off that career. Versus some of our resorts, naturally, we would have wanted you to have experience in that role. But then it also has to be a cultural fit too. So how, what's their philosophy of when it comes to associate engagement? I think one of the best partners in our organization are those that really do partner with HR. So it's not good cop, bad cop. They're seen as a united front and really supporting the initiatives that we have in the organization. But I would also say, that business acumen is huge when you're dealing with, a lot of properties are going through renovations and understanding capital expenses. So it's a lot.
It's interesting you said, because that was going to be one of the follow-up questions I have, which is sounds like a lot for a GM to kind of be responsible for. And I guess, my question to you on that is how do you think the role of the GM themselves has kind of changed or evolved over the last 5 years?
I think you have to have a bit of knowledge of everything, where before, a lot of general managers in hospitality, they have different tracks, so to speak. So they may have come up through a food and beverage track, or they may have come, we call the room side, which is front office and housekeeping, where now you really have to have been exposed to that sales side. We have convention centers that have over 200,000 square feet of meeting space. Properties that are generating millions of dollars. So you have to understand how that concept works with sales, marketing. There's so many different avenues right now, how rooms can be booked, understanding what's good business versus not good business. Some organizations are more focused on heads and beds, regardless of what the rate is. We have to make sure that it naturally makes sense and still in alignment with who our brand is and what we represent.
Well, exactly. It's very kind of multifaceted now. I feel like I hear people need to understand data. People need to understand the P&L. People need to be world class, actually being gregarious. That there's so many things that kind of go into making that really the person and using them as an unlock for your business to thrive. Is it, when it comes to the post-COVID kind of world now, Toby, how is the transition, when you look at talent to fill GM roles, for example, there's obviously a desire to fill internally. Has it been difficult to fill those kinds of roles internally, or have you had a good pipeline, good bench?
We have so many different training programs that definitely has helped with our pipeline and with succession planning. So when something does open, oftentimes we already have in back of our mind, if this person was ever to leave, this person probably would be next. And naturally, a lot of times it's based on someone's geographical preference. I think that has changed in hospitality. When I was growing up in hospitality, it was kind of, I got a phone call and said, and actually this is a perfect example. I was working in Orlando and I got a phone call and said, we purchased a resort in Amelia Island. And how could I say no? It's Florida, it's a resort, it's on the beach. 15 months later, I got a phone call. Okay, we're sending you now to Omaha, Nebraska. I was like, Omaha, Nebraska. But during that time, it was, of course, you could always say no, but you just kind of like, okay, this is where I'm going. Where, now people have more options. And it's like, not everyone wants to relocate for, that fast growth track. But I think any organization needs, no matter how large or small, you need to develop training and you need to have a succession plan. And people want to see that also. What does my development path look like? That helps develop that loyalty with the brand. Because if I don't have that pathway set out, guess what? The next recruiter that's going to call me and offer me the position I think I want next and pay me $20,000 more, I'm easily going to hop off and do that.
Yes. That is fair. It's interesting because I think when it comes to say finding staff now, okay, as in who are you competing with? As a hotel, has the competition changed? Are you competing with just other hotels looking for people, or who? Yeah, who do you see?
Every organization. It was so funny. One time in a 3-month period, I had 4 people leave to be flight attendants. I was like, that's so random. There's no holds bar. People are going, it's just interesting. Even my recruiting staff that we have here, a lot of them worked on the hotel side and more operations roles, and now they've jumped over to recruiting. But every type of company, organization you can think of, it's really has changed. It's not just straight hospitality. Some people are like, I want to get out of the field and I just want to try something different. I've done that twice in my career where I left hospitality, but I always say, I think when you're bitten by that bug, you kind of tend to come back, and I missed all the craziness of our world. But no, it's amazing sometimes that when people say I'm leaving and I say, what are you going to do? And they tell me, I was like, okay. Because a lot of skills are transferable too. And I think more companies are open to that. Even in our world where before we want you to have hotel experience, things of that nature, we're hiring more people that have the aptitude, that have those transferable skills that can come over. And then we can just teach you the specifics to the role.
See, that's actually quite interesting because I hear this a lot, and this definitely falls into my own philosophy, which is service can be taught.
Absolutely.
You want to teach me how to use a POS or use a booking system. Yeah, we can show you how to use that. But if you see trash in the corner of the room, do you immediately go and pick up that trash? Because even though it's not your job, and that's the kind of thing you look for. And I think this is definitely something that I think hospitality is waking up to in a way that I'll speak for tech, I didn't work in marketing ever in my life before. Do you know what I mean? And it's very much a case of you know what, do you have a type of aptitude? There's a great article I'll send you. My old boss wrote it. And she talks about it's called Giving Away Your Legos and Other Commandments for Startups. And it's when you're a kid, you're obsessed with your Legos, and they're your Legos. You don't want to give them to anybody. And it's the same when it comes to a job spec. It's we hired you for this job, but if the company goes from 50 people to 100 people, do you expect to have the same job when the company is twice the size? It's
exactly.
No, your scope, your role, everything about it, it's a different business. So how do you find people, and how do you look for people to have that type of flexibility that they know that you're going to be asked any number of different things, and finding those people to kind of thrive in that kind of environment? I definitely feel and the fact you kind of alluded to it, it's very cool, because I'm okay, that's these sort of how did you phrase them? I don't say aptitudinal. What was the word you used to describe the type of behaviors?
Competencies.
Yeah, these type of competencies, because it's you worked in a restaurant for X number of years, you worked in a hotel for X number of years. It's great that we know that you've been in that kind of an environment, but looking beyond simply the experience and looking for or trying to figure out how to test for those competencies or look for them as like leading indicators for potential, I think is a very strong sort of like driver for like finding the right kind of people to come into the organization. I heard a great phrase. I think you're gonna love this phrase because I think definitely gonna refer to it. I heard somebody goes, "We've gone from the great resignation to the great regret in hospitality." And the great regret is all the people who left the resignation now want to come back, because like we're at full employment now, or we're at pre 2020.
Yeah.
So the question is, if we're at pre 2020 levels, Toby, why do we still have a hiring problem? Why is it hard to hire people in hospitality if we're at the numbers we were before?
Yeah, that's true. It's definitely not what it was 2 years ago, or even a year ago. I mean, we're seeing definitely a slowdown in that process. We've been hovering around the same number of openings just from, turnover. We haven't had a huge increase, and we have people that are coming through the door. I think a good organization is going to find the people and use the methods to find them. So where before traditionally, you wouldn't utilize text messaging, but now text messaging is a huge thing. So we can text people that even 5 years ago may have applied to us, and they're going to read a text message versus even an email these days. Going out to those community agencies that are local in your area that may not even know your company exists or what opportunities that you have for entry level people coming in. So we have spent a lot of times partnering with just community organizations and kind of that boots on the ground mentality. If you're not going to find us, we will find you. And, partnering, it's so funny, we laugh. We have some of our hotels and they go to elementary schools to participate and do like reading with the kids. And we're joking that you're starting with the 5-year-olds, recruiting them at that age. But guess what? When that 5-year-old goes home, it's like, oh, Carol from Omni came here. The parent may not know who our company is. We've hired parents. We were doing a grand opening of a hotel, and we had probably about 60 community service partners come. When they heard the presentation, now these are community partners that we're trying to get the people that use their services for employment. They were coming to us. The community partners were like, can I get a part-time job? How do I apply? So I think, in any role, I always say I'm a salesperson aside from HR. I have to make it exciting, attractive, but you also have to make sure as a company we're delivering as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like holding up to the promise of like them actually like, oh yeah, we're a great place to work. Sign me up. Yeah, you get there, and then it's like, no. Makes tons of sense. I think I think there are a lot. I actually saw a TikTok trend recently where, I mean, on Reels because I'm too old for TikTok, but everyone got a kick out of that. But I thought it was interesting. It was this girl was just going around to like Chipotle's or to whichever is with her resume, and they're like, we don't know how to take a physical resume in the store. I'm actually not sure if it was a Chipotle, so I probably should bleep that part out, but I mean, I can do that anyway. But it's interesting in the sense that like the ways of searching for a job to getting in, when like the fact that a restaurant or like a chain didn't know how to take a physical resume when somebody walked in, I thought that was kind of, I don't want to say it was funny, but it was kind of like, wow,
it's true.
The system has just totally changed, and we don't really know. It's like, what's the evolutionary state of like recruitment for hospitality? Obviously, this is a landed podcast, and I'm not going to shill landed on the podcast. It's my church and state line. But everybody listening to this exact point, obviously, go check us out. And that is the only shilling. But I think, like one of the things I hear is that like the process of identifying talent is so expensive, like online. Like you gotta use a multitude of different services that you spend a lot of money on, that then create a lot of like resource burden on you. Whereas, say for example, you get 100, 200 resumes in, somebody's got to read those. And then companies have sort of criteria on top of what they're looking for in terms of like, gender split, in terms of like the amount of people they want to interview, in terms of like, D&I, like there's like, how do you build out their pipeline? And like, it drives up the cost of recruiting so much. And then to not have a process to like schedule people, make people show up. Like I remember I was a while back, I did a webinar with yeah, there were a lot of people there. And it was about it was about ghosting. And the amount of people, we put up like quizzes on the screen, and it was like, how often do you get ghosted in interviews? And this was like HR professionals. And I was like, 0 to 25, 25 to 50, 75 plus. And there were so many, like I actually would take out the number just to put in the notes of the podcast, but the 75 plus people were like, we get ghosted like 75% of the time, 80% of the time. And it's like, oh my God, like figure out.
I saw McDonald's offering, it was like $400. It was some crazy number just to show up to the interview. And you didn't mean you were getting hired, didn't even mean that you accepted the job. It was just to show up to the interview. But the one thing you were talking about was all of the hurdles, right? Just to get through the process to hire. And I think that's where we've been really smart in our organization, where we're utilizing technology, but not taking out that other piece to it. So we very much will still do job fairs. Now, the difference is we're not going to a lot of job fairs that, the town may be having and you're sitting with 50 other people hiring. We do that for colleges mostly, but we will host many of our locations twice a month, once a month. So people will actually like to come on site, and you're guaranteed an interview. And if you're going to interview with who you need to interview, now managers may be a little bit different, but you can leave out there with a job offer. So now I've taken away all those hurdles. You may not have even applied yet for the job, but you're talking to someone and you're going through that process, because that's what's discouraging for many people. I've seen where it's like, I have to apply. The applications take me 45 minutes. Then it kicked me out. And then I can't call to find out who do I talk to. I'm getting put in circles, and then you wait for an interview, and then they don't get back to you. If you're operating that way, you're too far behind.
Totally. So like what the takeaway here really is speed of communication as much as anything. That like, you need to be like able to reply, get as much information as you can from the person that like meet your sort of interview criteria, and then get them scheduled as like fast as possible.
That's people's mindset, right? If you're in the drive-through longer than 5 minutes, you're so mad by the time you get to the window, because it's that popcorn mentality. We want everything quick. So when you really are understanding what people need, and then how do you match that with your organization needs, that's when, it's kind of starting to make that match.
But it's also very competitive. Like, I mean, like we see in our data, for example, that people who apply for jobs don't just apply for one job. Like they'll apply for like multiple. And so I guess everyone on a core level is competing on like wage first and foremost. It's like, okay, you're offering 16, this person's 16.50, this person's 17. Like the person doesn't really care, do they? And so the question is, if you're offering 16 and somebody's offering 17, how do you communicate or show how valuable you are to that, or that they are to that organization, as they potentially could be to that organization? Because like, I don't believe in hospitality. I believe in hospitality. I don't believe within the industry that is hospitality that everything is so price sensitive in terms of salary. It couldn't be. If like some great restaurants, some great hotels, some great resorts with great benefits would far outweigh that extra dollar that somebody's taking in their sort of like the hourly wage. What do you see as like key drivers for you in terms of like when talent are like figuring out where to go? Why would they pick you over somewhere else? Like, what are the things?
Well, a few things. Number one, you have to make sure you're in tune with your market and what people are paying. And you may not be the leader of the market, but you have to be able to talk to that total compensation. So, and what does that total package look like? From benefits to increases to discounted room rates. There's so many other things, but a lot of times people just don't understand what does a total compensation package look like, and how do you present that to someone. So if I tell you, okay, we're going to hire you at $16 an hour and that's it, versus we are going to hire you at $16 an hour. You're getting this much PTO. You're getting benefits at this rate. There's a discount for you here. We offer transportation vouchers. Now I've given you a nice package, where a lot of times that was just only offered to managers when you talk in that language, but now you're talking to more budget conscious people that need to do that. Now I've had people that have come back and said, well, they're giving me 50 cents more. And I was like, okay, did you ask them what their rates of benefits are? And a lot of times when you can do side by side, they're giving you $50 or 50 cents more, but guess what? Their benefits are going to cost you an extra $150 a month.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So, it's really taking that time with each candidate, and then they value the fact that you're spending that time with them.
Totally. And it's articulating the benefit. I mean, that's the thing. And there is tons of things that you guys are doing that you're like, how do we make them aware and how do we communicate this to them? I think exactly to your point. I mean, that's amazing. I hope everyone's listening and they get this part, which is like, being able to like dollar amount it and being able to say, yeah, it's all well and good. You're getting 50 cents more in your absolute salary, but the cost of those benefits that you would also get there will effectively subtract 150 from your salary versus what we're already offering. I mean, that's an incredibly powerful way to compare and make people aware of like the opportunity that you offer. I mean, I'm definitely taking that away as like a sort of, I mean, were I to be in the hotel business, I would take that away. But I would
also say, I think some organizations, this is where they miss it, where they think it has to be a one size fits all. If you're spread throughout the United States, there's different pockets where they have different needs. And if you try to make everything one size fits all, you're going to be missing the boat. So we have a very remote location that is really hard for us to recruit for because it's remote. And myself and a coworker, we were given the project, go there with an open canvas, talk to the people, managers, what do they need, and come back. And it was a scary project because we're like, how much are we going to push the line here? But it's great. Like the benefits that we did for that location that we do not offer in our organization anywhere else. And people were like, wait, I want that in the organization. And we're like, great, transfer over there and you can have a extra wellness day a month. We don't do wellness days, but for managers here, they're going to get a wellness day a month that you can use however you want. You're going to get, some of all these other great perks that we offer, but it's unique to that area. So I think, when you're looking at that situational leadership, what makes sense in certain pockets, markets. But if you're like, this is it, and this is all we're doing, you're missing the boat on some opportunities.
Also, by the way, I think that's like such a great phrase to think about it, like the situational opportunity, like as in like not every single location has the same needs, and designing bespoke solutions that can have payoff elsewhere. Like to your point, I mean, like it's interesting to think about that now, like that there are difficult locations. Presumably that's like, well, that's a difficult location. Is that like that's up like in the mountains somewhere or kind of, yeah. I find that when I have people on the pod and they talk about difficult locations, I'm always like, is that like near a national park or I feel like I hear that all the time. But it's funny, like in the sense that like the benefits that work there, and then it's like, okay, well, the whole purpose of this benefit is to attract talent. It's like you want that benefit, it's available for you if you go and you do a stint there or you help stand up a program there. You know what I mean? It's like that's awesome. And I think like as a message, it sounds like how sort of flexible and proactive a HR department can be as well.
Exactly.
I mean, like it's not like, it's very much a case of like, we know we need to fill these roles and we will do what we can to make that happen. And that's like pretty awesome. That's like a very, I mean, I'm just rather impressed with you, Toby.
Well, thank you. Yeah, but I think that we've all been challenged, no matter what industry you are. How do you look at things different? And I think that's what sets people apart from a candidate pool, when people can provide those type of examples. When we're speaking about remote locations, we have 2 locations that are fairly remote, totally different states. And we were having a hard time looking for manager candidates. And we're like, why don't we just hire a recruiter that is all they do, is spend their entire day recruiting for specifically those two locations. And because they're both remote, they may not like this location, but may like this location. And we reduced the number of openings and the turnover significantly by doing that. And it was a temp assignment. It lasted 7 months. The person knew coming into it, it wasn't going to be a long-term assignment, but it was what that need was at that time. So if anything, people can't be fearful when you talk about, cliche, think outside the box. In this market, in this environment, you totally need to use that critical thinking, do something, dare to be different, don't be afraid to be the leader in even the industry of doing certain things, because it's too late if you're waiting for everybody else to do it.
Interesting. And that's cool that you have designed such a system to enable that. I have had many people on the pod, for example, that like to be second in terms of like technological implementations, like let the big boys figure that out, and then we'll figure out how to like position ourselves beyond that, not first to market on things. But I do think, especially in like recruitment and specifically in hospitality, that there has to be innovative ways and creative thinking to solve this, because literally spraying an ad on Indeed is not going to get you the talent you need fast enough to help you thrive. One of the things I think about a lot is like thinking of like labor as like sort of like a marketing funnel, where it's like total volume of candidates, how many of them actually come up the funnel, how many interview, and mapping it all the way down. And then once they're in, how long are they in? And so like having almost looking at it like a marketing funnel, because I think it very much helps like understand, like, if you run an Indeed ad and you spend $5,000 and you get 100 applicants, you're like, oh, that's a decent, efficient sort of cost. Yeah. And then of the, say, 199 don't work out to look like anything, so you spend $5,000 on one, and you got a person, that person better come in, otherwise it's like, what are you spending your money on? And it's not necessarily like a problem with like, the message of what the job is on offer. It's just like the way the platform is designed, that it's very resource intensive, I think, for like lots of people to like manage at scale. You know what I mean? Like you need a lot of people reviewing and all that stuff. I guess, one of the things I did want to ask you about, because I know that we're kind of coming up on time, and I know it's nears and dears, and I think this might like feed in kind of quite well, is like, when it comes to like, recruiting from outside of hospitality, like one thing that I think a lot of like hospitality groups do quite well on is bringing in sort of like veterans and troops and people kind of being decommissioned out of sort of the military. I know that the military is very near and dear to your heart. And if I'm saying military and not army, or army and not
you got it, you're good,
or Marines, not whatever, I feel like I caught out in this all the time. But within that, something related to the Pentagon, that like, do you have a formal program for like helping kind of move like decommissioned or people who are like post their sort of military career into like Omni, or how do you speak to that, I guess, is like my question, because I know that you should articulate what it is that you have founded as well. Your nonprofit, is it a nonprofit or what?
Yes, it is. So twofold. Yes, I did start a nonprofit. It's called KOTA, KOTA, which stands for Keep Our Troops Alive, and was founded by an unfortunate event where my brother, who served 2 tours in Afghanistan, came home and within 2 years, unfortunately succumbed to suicide. And a lot of that had to do with, thank you, for the PTSD that he endured and just trying to integrate back in life. So really the focus is getting his story out and message. We've been able to help so many people just know that they're not alone. But then another avenue of that is siblings of suicide, where, when someone succumbs to suicide, if it's a husband, they're caring about the wife, the children, if it's a parent, from that perspective. But siblings have a very unique relationship. I think of my 2 children, their unique relationship they have, and there wasn't a lot for people to address from that avenue. So that's kind of a family initiative that we have from that standpoint. So thank you for asking about that. And then in general, we have a lot of our properties that are near military bases. And you have a lot of families that their spouse can be deployed, and their spouses that are left behind, want employment. So what we've tried to do is target those bases, but giving the flexibility that the military life needs. So that flexibility, if you have a deployed spouse, you may only be able to work from 9 a.m. till 3 because you have to get the kids to school and pick them up. You may need, extra time off to get ready for deployment of a loved one. And the great thing is then if you relocate and get deployed to another state, there may be a very good chance that we already have a location at that state too, and you can maintain your tenure within the organization. So just last week, we actually had a call with another organization. They're trying to build a bond with us specifically on spouses of military. So it definitely, as an organization, we look out for that and how can we be of service from this end.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I think, there's so many transferable skills just in
Absolutely.
terms of work ethic, and like determination, obviously,
but think culinary, right? People are chefs in the military. They could be a chef for us, engineers, they're working on tankers and they're working on boats, and that's transferable skills that can work over to us as well. So a lot of things. And that's why I said hospitality in general is just such a great industry because there's something for everybody. I've worked in more departments and more positions, started off in in-room dining, worked as a banquet server, restaurant server. I kept dropping trays and they're like, my dear, this is not the life for you. Let's get you in the front
we'll
of the
find
house.
somewhere for you though. Yeah.
We'll find a home for you. And then, I've done sales, conference services. I've been general manager of some limited service hotels. So I've had a taste of it all before I even stumbled upon HR to find my niche. And I went to college for a few years, but don't have a college degree. And, that's why even high school, we try to get some children from a high school age because college is not the path for everybody. So first of all, I promote college. I instill that in my kids. So I'm not telling that. But what I am saying is that if it's not your path, guess what? You can still have a very successful career. And let me show you what that looks like.
Totally. And I think that's something that I think also separates good from great in hospitality is now in a post-COVID world, not just saying that we pick people at random to be promoted, but we have designated career paths and are able to identify talent for leadership positions, leadership training, greater training for like promotable sort of like tracks, and being able to show that it's not a summer job to work in this hotel, that there's a full-time career here if you want to go get it.
Exactly. And showing people what that looks like and starting them early on. There's such great talent all around you. And that's how you build those future pipelines, and that's where I pride myself in the development of people. I've always taken that very seriously. And part of the reason why is I've always had amazing mentors in my life who've identified things in me that I never saw myself, who've pushed me for positions I never felt I was ready for. So, there's someone in our organization and she's a director of human resources at one of our large convention hotels and is killing it like a rock star. Well, she started off as my HR coordinator in 2012, I think. Nice. So just to see, and we joke all the time, she's relocated. I've sent her 6 different places in different states and she's relocated. She's been a trooper, but just to hear and see her now, but most importantly, she's doing that now for those coming behind her. So that's how you just keep it going. And the fact that someone identifies you and thinks enough of you and sees that and sows those seeds, whether you're just a front desk agent right now, or you're already on a path of a manager. I always say you have to be on a treasure hunt every day. Where's that treasure within someone that you can help, dig that out?
That's awesome. Toby, can you believe we've been talking for 50 minutes?
Look at that. Amazing.
We've actually looked at it. And I always like to ask people at the very end of the podcast, and I feel like we've got so much wisdom out of you. But I guess, what advice would you give to somebody listening to the podcast? Typically, the people listening to this podcast are your peers.
Something I really live by, and it's really simple, is leave your thumbprint on it. Everyone's thumbprint is unique. It's not the same. And people should know that you've been in the room. People should know that you've made an impression, that you're not blending in with anybody else. And I can tell you that simple piece has helped me in my career because most positions that I've been in have been that someone has called me and they've remembered, oh, you volunteered for this and you took this on and you've done a great job, or you've helped mentor this person. So, understand what your personal mission is, find a company that aligns with that, and trust me, you won't go wrong.
Toby, you're an absolute legend. Thank you so much for coming on the pod.
I appreciate you having me. It's been wonderful. Thank you.